Yeah, well, thank you all for inviting me to be a part of this. I think that all too often we have a lot of these conversations in an echo chamber, and I hope that by involving some of the private industry here and getting our perspective on what we see works, what's been challenges in the past, and how we can move the needle forward on some of these issues is important. At the end of the day, I've heard a lot of comments today about Connecticut needs to catch up and needs to be doing a better job. I would just take a moment to pause and say, Connecticut has been doing and does a fantastic job in comparison to its peers in other states for decades. We are consistently recognized as a top 10 in the United States for sustainable waste management practices. And that's because of, I think, folks like all of us putting a focus on pushing ourselves to do better for our constituents, our stakeholders, and the people of Connecticut. Private industry has continued to invest money to do this with and without government support. Our own business, we're proud to let everybody know here that we started an initiative 5 to 6 years ago around CNG for collection vehicles that has reduced greenhouse gas emissions in the state of Connecticut by tens of thousands of metric tons. And our approach to that, to Kevin's point, was we focused in particularly on routes that were servicing environmental justice communities. We thought that would be the first thing we could do to try to help those communities. Diesel emissions are known carcinogen. And that was the way the industry stepped up with no public funding to take a bite at that. So the private industry is invested in making the state a better place in all of their waste management practices. To point to some of the successes that we are seeing, and I think it's important because it proves out the things we are doing in the state are working, and if we continue our efforts, we'll continue to see incremental improvements. And these issues that are brought up today are not nearly as insurmountable or as large as people may think they are. Back in 2006, DEP projected that the state of Connecticut would produce about 5.2 million tons of MSW by 2024. In 2016, they realized they were going to be off by a large margin and readjusted that to about 3.5 to 3.9 million tons. And what we're going to see here is that we're going to come in way below that by 2024. We're actually seeing a reduction of MSW disposal each and every year. That's a great success for the state of Connecticut. That means all those waste hierarchies and the reduce, reuse, recycle programs, they're working. Our infrastructure is working, our programs are working. Yes, are there challenges with single stream? There may be, but all in all, it's been an incredible success for the state of Connecticut. I know CJ's on this call. He's seen the amount of tons that comes through our facility to be handled for recycling since they went to single stream, I think probably double. So we're seeing incredible successes throughout the state. We have to continue to stay committed to what we're doing, but this is not a crisis by the far stretch. We should be celebrating a lot of our successes. I was asked to talk about the challenges of the industry. I think what I've learned in this call was that balancing the needs and wants of the stakeholders is really boiling to the surface here. Just on this call, I heard Pam start off by saying trucking waste out of the state of Connecticut is no good. I'm not sure what the support for that is. However, that was her position. Kevin came out firmly discussing how burning waste in the state of Connecticut is not a solution. We're a service provider. We're looking to serve the needs of all of our customers and our communities. But there's two very strong voices about what is the proper solution. Is landfilling an option? Is landfilling not an option? Is burning waste an option? Is burning waste not an option? Curbside organics and some other programs. Great options for continuing to pull waste out of the waste stream. However, we heard the financial side of this being discussed today by some of the municipal leaders and the increase of costs. Curbside organics, we could start a program tomorrow. It just has to be paid for. It's not cost neutral. It's not going to be a cost saving measure. So the financing has to come from someplace. So I think what we're seeing is these conversations are a really good place to start, is that everybody has a slightly different perspective on this. At the end of the day, we have to make sure, though, that the waste and recycling is handled in a responsible manner, and we just continue to focus on ways we can do a little bit better every day. And I think we're seeing the successes of that throughout the state of Connecticut. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Frank. We have a couple questions. I can get to my chat. There we go. For both of you, if you could ask the state to change one thing about the law as it relates to your industry, what would it be and why?
Well, I think for one thing, you know, I struggle with all this all the time. We have parallel collection necessitated, meaning on a commercial side, customers are required to have trash or recycling, or trash and recycling service, which is a fantastic law that is one of its kind, including in the Northeast. Massachusetts doesn't have such legislation. However, I walk into, and I'm not to pick on them, but Starbucks, in some locations, they have recycling in the store, and we don't have a recycling container in the back of the store. That's totally unacceptable. So I think Lou and some others were talking about enforcement. You know, we have some great legislation on the books. Parallel collection is one of those, and holding people accountable to that is I think a good step.
Steve? Oh, did I mute him? Hold on. Got too much power here with the mute button. All right, Steve, you should be good to go.
Okay. Yeah, this is I feel like a little bit like there was a story in one of my political science texts about the difference between a US fighter pilot and a Russian fighter pilot, that the Russian fighter pilot had to call back to headquarters to find out what his or her next move would be, where the American fighter pilot was able to make a quick decision on his or her feet and decide what the next part of the mission should be. It's really hard to prioritize the kinds of things that the industry might want, because I hear so many different voices. You know, we could talk about what would be really good in the area of organics, or we could talk what's really good in the area of recycling, or we could talk really what's good in the area of the disposal policy. But I think one of the ones that I think I'm pretty safe on advancing, Connecticut's got really good recycling in the municipalities generally. We've echoed this in a couple of the reports. We did a lot of work with the task force to study packaging and paper waste years back, that made a recommendation about EPR, that it wasn't right for Connecticut yet for a whole host of reasons. But in that report, one of the things that we echoed on was that the 5 or so larger urban areas, urban cities in the state have substandard recycling programs. And if, you know, why are you looking at the communities that have a 35 or 40% recycling rate, which could be improved? There's no doubt about that. It could go up a couple of points. But, you know, the other part of that equation is, how can you live with a city that's doing 8% or 12%? That's where a lot of the low-hanging fruit is, to try to help move the recycling needle and get more material to market. And that is another issue about the minimum content. I really want to drive this home as a public policy. This industry that I work for, which I'm coming up on 30 years, we are expert at collecting material. Nobody can route trucks and collect material better than the companies in this industry. They've got this down to a science. So that being said, we can collect the material, we can get it to a recycling center, we can clean it up to a standard and deliver it to market. And I will re-echo what Frank said. We've done that with private money. We haven't done it with taxpayer money in terms of public investment. So it's been private capital that's financed that system, and we've done that. We need markets. We could go to our municipal customers and say, the rate's not going up so much because we're now getting paid a handsome price for the bale of the commodity that we produced. Until the demand for that material goes up, we're going to be in this little bit of a wet paper bag syndrome about who pays. And stronger markets, which we believe through minimum content, could really help push that envelope. And we're hopeful there, that there's real hope in that argument.
Great. We actually have one more question for each of you. I'll bounce back to Frank first. This respondent says, agree, disposal isn't free. Someone has to pay for it. Do you think it should be the responsibility of the municipalities, or do you believe that the manufacturers and producers should take some of that financial burden?
Well, I think from my perspective, it's always the responsibility at some point to the taxpayer, whether it's going to be through an EPR program, whether it's through municipal taxes. At the end of the day, the taxpayer pays. There's no free lunch. It's the first thing I learned in economics. It's whether the cost shifts or get magnified by another big program, that would be my concern there in that area. Specifically, we've supported EPR on hard to handle materials. We continue to do so. Lithium-ion batteries is a good place to focus on. However, packaging, which I hear coming up for discussion, is someplace where I think that we would actually create a system that would be less efficient and more expensive than what we have currently. So these kind of conversations we really welcome, because we should have a real transparent conversation about how we handle these materials currently, what costs are if we were to implement these programs in the state of Connecticut, because referring to places like British Columbia to Connecticut just don't work. And we've evaluated this. I would refer everybody to the EPR task force that was set up a couple of years ago. There was a great report. Maybe the CRC can distribute it to its board members, so everybody can take a real in-depth, I think it's a 20-something page report, which looked at the cost of implementing these systems. So maybe that's something I'd offer the board.
If I might, I'll follow that up on the producer responsibility.
Actually, Steve, hold on one second, because your question was, what is your concern with EPR? So there you go.
There you go. I'm sorry, I thought it was the same question for both of us.
No.
Again, I want to go back to the report that Frank mentioned. It's the task force on packaging and paper waste. And we have the link of it, Jim. I'll be glad to send it right along to you.
Great.
That was a Connecticut based project done under the authorities of the legislature. One of the things that we have found in the EPR system is that you're changing the way things are done. And when you do that, there's going to be some positives and some negatives. And when a group of Connecticut leaders who were expert in this area looked at these issues, they determined that the benefit wasn't going to be there for the state. So that's one of the messages we want to make sure people are aware of. One of the things that we've also done is and again, it echoes what Frank said, that people are going to pay for this. We've done some calculation, and it's not the fact that, well, EPR is going to solve the problems, or EPR without minimum content or without strong markets. If the bottle bill is a great example of an EPR program, it didn't protect the major market for bottle bill glass in the Northeast, because that factory still shut down. We have other policies with our economics and our tax policy that, we need capacity to use the materials that we collect. And I was thinking about it today. There was a former assistant running around the state saying that, you know, we're going to have all these great industries in Connecticut to manage the recyclables. When are we going to build an aluminum smelter? When are we going to have a new paper mill? When are we going to have a new plastics manufacturing plant to use the materials we collect? That's a really important part. If we're going to ramp up and divert more material, and we're not going to send it to waste energy plants and to landfills, then we're going to have additional capacity to manage it. And it's problematic when it comes to the Northeast. So it's a question of who pays. And when you try to change a battleship around, there's dislocations, there's pros and cons. But one of the things we identified, and I'll put it to you in this context of the environmental justice and social justice, a poor family will pay more money, somewhere between $100 and $140 a year, we estimated, if we have EPR. They're going to have higher grocery bills, and their consumer product bill will go up. Now, maybe that's good. Maybe their tax bill will go down. I don't think so, but that's the kinds of dynamics that we're going to have to really get into when we explore EPR programs as we go into the next session. And we hope the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Materials Management really drills down and tries to understand the pros and cons and the cost benefits.
So probably the last question we have time for. What do the panelists think about converting Connecticut's single stream recycling systems to multi-stream recycling systems?
Well, I would say on March 13th was one of the hardest days of my professional career. That was the day that it became apparent that the state was going to shut down. However, we were going to be expected to collect the waste and recycling on that Monday. There was extreme panic around the virus spreading by surfaces. There was concern about interacting with customers. And one of the things I was most grateful for was that we had a single stream collection service that was containerized and automated, as well as our MSW collections, where our employees were able to safely remain in the cabs of their vehicles and service all of our customers and communities. And we have been beating the drum for the safety of our employees for decades. And the automation of the collection process has brought our industry safety record to a place where it's, before, quite frankly, it was inconscionable, the amount of injuries that our employees were sustaining. I'm really happy to report that our company ourselves, and the vast majority of the industry in Connecticut, is highly automated and containerized collection, keeping our people safe. To go back to a multi-stream collection, which would include hand pickup for the most part, and if not, several more containers with several more trucks, several more traffic, more abuse of the roads, more emissions, and I believe higher costs and less actual tons going into the waste stream would be a step backwards and probably a 20-year step backwards on safety, efficiency, and greenhouse gas emissions. I understand the reflex that people have and they hear, oh, there's contamination, but it's pretty easy math. We've doubled the amount of volume that goes through the recycling stream by going to automated collection and the single stream process. Okay, even if we've doubled the contamination rate, which it looks like we have, we're getting, I believe, an increase in about 75% more tons going into the recycling process than we were before. That's a huge success. But I understand that the concern around contamination, we're concerned as well. It drives up our costs, it drives up our issues, and it lowers the value of the stream. So we are 100% committed to work with the communities and the state to try to educate and enforce our way to better recycling contamination rates. Yeah. But going back to a multi-stream process is not the solution that I would be looking for.
Yeah. If I might, again, agreed. there's some communities have, but what I've heard from the industry, and particularly the people who are tip of the spear, material recovery facility design with the automation and the stuff coming on into the future with the more optical sorters and the full, the new age MRF that's coming. We can handle the single stream, and we can produce a high quality bale and get it to market. What we really need is the contamination. There may be a fraction of contamination that's caused by the actual single stream process, but most of the contamination comes because of the uninformed generator. It's the wish cycling. It's the person putting the yogurt cup in the, polypropylene is very recyclable, but boy, it doesn't really work well when there's a half a cup of yogurt in it, so that's the problem. And it's the pizza box, which is highly recyclable, but not the pizza in it. So that's what we have to do with the generator education. And that's going to be key going forward. We can have mechanized and state-of-the-art facilities, and we can work tirelessly to continually reduce contamination. But the real art form there, we can do wonderful things inside the plant, like the one behind me. But the more difficult thing is going to be the continuing challenge is to get the generators to do it right. So that's my. It's not the single stream or the dual stream. Whatever the system the communities have has to be run well. And too many companies my members are like Frank saying that we're very dedicated to single stream, and we do have to remember it keeps trucks off the roads. Big part of the single stream process.
Yeah, and just real quick, I just would announce for everybody now, we're going through a major RFP process to build what we think will be the largest and most technologically advanced MRF, single stream MRF in Connecticut, in the Northeast, and maybe the nation, in Connecticut in the next 18 months. And that will be designed to handle fully single stream pumps. So that's where we believe the future still is.